Well, good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee edition of Flight Lines, the stories behind the stories. I think the title could be Six Rotors and an Unexpected Event. And what we're going to be talking about is some time that I spent at Mount Rainier coordinating youth programs there and the projects that the programs were involved in. There were two programs, the Youth Conservation Corps, which was a summer program for high school kids. They would come into the park and do work projects for 30 hours of the week, and then there were 10 hours of environmental education. We had a bunch of crew leaders, and I was a work projects coordinator for 1 year, excuse me, and then I was the director of the program for many other years. Then the second program was the Young Adult Conservation Corps, which was patterned after the old CCC, and that was designed to handle youth between the ages of 16 and 23. It's a work skills program. So we've had the young folks come into the park and we had crews and they would go and do a number of different projects, work skill projects, where they were rehabbing houses, one which I eventually wound up living in, and, other projects. And then we had individuals detailed to the auto shop or the carpentry shop or any number of other things. So those are the two programs that I pretty much was involved in. And during that time, the first summer, when we had the YCC, the summer program, I was able to connect with a reserve unit of helicopter pilots, the folks that fly the CH-47. To able to help us move materials into the backcountry for my crews to work on. And the YCC kids would go out for a week at a time, Monday through Friday, and they would be camped out in the backcountry, and we would fly the materials in that they might have needed, and sometimes it might have been a sling load of food. I have an interesting story about that when a bear discovered one of the sling loads, and we'll get back to that. But anyway, so we were doing all these things with the reserve unit. Now they would come and be in the park for the summer, and instead of doing their reserve training and flying around Yakima, they would fly bus bodies and different things around just so they had a load. They would come into the park and they would do work for us. Now, we had to be careful because the Park Service contracted with local helicopter operators to bring stuff into the backcountry. But the thing with the Chinooks, we could carry more and we could go higher than the other helicopters. So we weren't interfering with anybody's business as far as the contractors. And that was a key thing I had to overcome. So they would be in the park. And what we did is we created a base camp for them, an LZ, landing zone, in a gravel pit that was a designated already disturbed area. So we didn't have to worry about any environmental concerns about the helicopters being in the park, because in the gravel pit it was pretty messed up anyway. So that was the base of what was going on. And so as time went on and I got more involved with the operations, the Park Service thought it'd be a good idea to send me to school to learn how to be a loadmaster crew member on a Chinook. So I spent 2 weeks in Boise, Idaho, learning about this aircraft and all the things that it did, and how it worked and how to be safe around one of these. And so it was a very exciting experience for me. And I have 50 hours in my logbook as a Chinook crew member. So the unexpected, here are the six rotors. And the reason that this helicopter was so valuable to us and is a very important part of our military inventory of aircraft is that it revolves around a thing called density altitude. And what that means is that when you go higher in the atmosphere, the molecules of the air are less dense. So it takes more effort and more speed for a wing, or in this case, a rotor, which is a rotary wing, to revolve around to get enough speed built up so it creates lift. Pilots here in Florida have to deal with density altitude all the time. On a really hot day, the air at the runway is very, very thin, and so it takes longer for you to get off the ground, and you're gonna climb slower as compared to a normal day with standard temperature is 59 degrees. The air is a little cooler, it's dense, the airplane performs better. So that was one of the key factors about why Chinooks have become such a valuable asset in the military. So the reserve unit came into the park, and as I said, I was living in the park at the time, and about 4:30 in the morning, I get this pounding on the door of my house, and I went down, and it was one of the Rangers from Paradise, which is a visitor center main visitor center on the south side of the park, and that's where most people stage their climb experience. They start from Paradise and hike up to a base camp at 10,000 feet, Camp Muir, and from there they'll leave to climb to the summit. Well, the ranger at Paradise said, "We have a climbing party we've made contact with, and they're stranded and hurt at 13,500 feet, just 500 feet below the summit. That's way up there." And so he said, "Do you think your Army guys will want to go up and get them?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. Let's go find out." So we went down to the gravel pit and the base camp, and they were up. And we asked them, and it was kind of a rhetorical question because I knew the answer, but they said, "Yeah, we'll be glad to go up and get them." But here was the challenge. At that particular moment, we had ground fog. You couldn't see 20 feet in front of you. You looked up and you could see clear blue sky. Well, you're not supposed to fly in those conditions. Well, these guys didn't give a rip. Most of them were experienced Chinook pilots, Vietnam veterans. They knew how to handle their aircraft. So we all pile in, rescue ranger and myself. The ranger gives me a topo map where he thinks they're located. So I'm sitting up front between the pilot and the co-pilot, with me in the middle in the jump seat with the topo map on my lap. And the ranger thought this is where they should be. Well, okay, so we start climbing up. Now, we're climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. And Rainier is right in front of us, this big, beautiful white cone against the blue sky. And as we get closer and higher, we could see rocks sticking out of the steep slope of the mountain at that point. And then all of a sudden, some of the rocks started waving. You said, "Ha, there they are. That's where they are." So what happened next was kind of, a unique thing for me. It wasn't unique for these pilots, but what they did, the aircraft came in, and then he turned and backed in to the slope, and the crew chief lowered the ramp. Now, the slope is like this. And so what he does, the pilot backs in to make contact with the slope with the ramp. I'm leaning out the right side door, watching the rotors and looking where the people are and making sure the rotors aren't hitting the snow. And then the crew chief is doing the same thing off the ramp. He's looking up and making sure the rotors aren't hitting the snow. And so we pull all the people in, and I got a great picture of it. And, you'll see it here on the podcast. And we now take off, close the door, close the ramp. And then, the guy, the slope is like this. So what he did to take off, he just dropped the nose like that. And we just kind of went down the slope and headed to Puyallup, which is a small town between Seattle and Tacoma. And we went to the hospital. But the problem was we couldn't land at the heliport or the helicopter pad next to the emergency room because we were too big, too heavy. So we landed in the parking lot next to the emergency room. As we were settling in, as the helicopter was coming down, the prop wash that comes out of these rotors is in excess of 150 to maybe 200 miles an hour. It's pretty strong. And as we were settling down, I'm looking out to the neighbors, and I'm seeing all their fences around the parking lot going, "We just flattened them," and I'm thinking, oh boy, somebody's going to be unhappy about that. So we get the person into the emergency room. I'm in my flight suit. I got my helmet under my arm. I go walking into the hospital after we got the person in the emergency room, and then I'm trying to find somebody to let them know we just trashed their neighbors' fences. And I met an administrator, and I said, we're awful sorry. I mean, it's the only thing we could do is land in the parking lot because it was really early in the morning. There weren't any cars in there. And he said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. We can, you know, it's not an issue. Glad you're able to bring the climbing party in, and everybody's doing well. All right, so we get back in a helicopter, and off we go back to Rainier. Well, later that afternoon, we had just finished dropping off some material in the backcountry, and we get a call on the radio that someone had fallen into a ravine. Hiker had pretty well messed himself up, and the rangers were able to get him out of the ravine and wanted to know if we would fly them to Puyallup in the emergency room. Well, yeah, sure. So we landed, loaded the person in, and now we're all, we're doing our thing to Puyallup. But here's the problem. Now the parking lot's filled with cars, and we can't land there. Luckily for us, across the street from the parking lot is the county fairgrounds. So we landed at the fairgrounds, and the ambulance came down, picked the person up, brought him back up to the hospital. I rode in the ambulance up to the hospital, and guess what? I met the same administrator, and he said to me, well, we had a staff meeting this morning, and we've decided to build you a landing zone, an LZ, at the fairgrounds, so we won't have this issue again. That was great. Well, here's the unexpected out of this, besides the 2 rescues on that same day. Fort Lewis, which is in Tacoma, is a regular Army base, and that's the base where regular Army pilots are trained to fly the Chinooks, and the crew members are developed there. So what happened as a result of our reserve unit doing the rescue, Fort Lewis now is assigned all the rescues at Mount Rainier, and that started, I believe, in around 1979, 1980. That was the time frame that we made the rescue with the reserve unit, and since then, Fort Lewis has been tasked with doing rescues at Mount Rainier, and they have done a number of them over the years. Again, because of the ceilings of the aircraft, the Chinook can go up. Our models, A and the B units we were using, were able to fly it at 16,000 feet and below. So it was well below the summit of Rainier. And they were doing a number of different rescues with the various models. Now, the Chinook helicopter first flew in the military in 1961. It's been in service that whole time. Models now have gone up to the F model, which is even a more powerful model. It can carry more weight. It can fly higher than some of the earlier models. It's a platform that has stood the test of time. When Boeing designed it and took it over, they had a good design, and it's really, really worked out well. So here's the story behind the story. I wrote this scenario up and shared it with one of the websites on the aviation world, and it was I came across it, and I wrote the article, sent it in. Well, they published it. Well, as a result of that being published, I got an email from a gentleman, and it turns out he was the pilot. He was the pilot on that rescue mission, and he reacquainted me with a lot of the guys who were in that reserve unit at that time, and we had a great time going back and forth and catching up. And it turns out that after I left, and I went to North Cascade Park to do something else up there, the Chinooks maintained their relationship with Mount Rainier, and they were flying materials into the backcountry for many, many years. I believe they're still doing it. And, the unexpected, the 6 rotors and the unexpected led to a number of positive things. So that's the story of the rescue at 13,500 and the outcomes of that and the positive things that developed. So thanks for joining me today with the morning coffee edition of the Flight Lines and the rest of the stories. we enjoy bringing these short stories to you. So have a great day, and God bless.